Only 42 seconds, that's all it took for Jasmine Crockett to silence the most powerful man in America. Live on national TV. In a packed congressional hearing with 53 million viewers watching, she cracked open a red Doge-sealed folder and read a name linked to Epstein's flight logs. Trump tried to interrupt. He failed. His mic stayed on, and what it caused stunned the world. But what exactly did Jasmine reveal that made Donald Trump panic in front of the entire nation? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. Only 42 seconds. That's how long it took for the silence to break in room 7A of the Capitol. 3 red lights blinked on overhead. Live across CNN, MSNBC, and that folder was death, political, reputational. Maybe worse, the room didn't breathe. Jasmine did. She walked to the microphone, slow, deliberate. Then she leaned in and spoke the line that shattered the performance of power. They tried to redraw maps, she said, voice steady. I came to redraw truth. Trump flinched. No one clapped. No one dared. This wasn't a speech. This was a controlled detonation. She placed the red folder on the podium and tapped it once, a sound like a gunshot in a church. This, she said, is what your government didn't want you to see. Not for years ago, not today, and certainly not before an election. A ripple of whisper slithered through the room. Aides texting, cameras zooming. In the gallery, a woman put her hand to her mouth. Trump leaned to whisper to his counsel, but the mic caught it. She won't read it. She doesn't have the guts. Jasmine heard it. Everyone did. She paused, looked straight at him, and smiled. Funny, she said, never taking her eyes off him. They said the same thing about the girl who told the truth about Epstein. And now she's dead. A gasp. One senator pushed back from his desk. The chairwoman tried to interrupt, but Jasmine raised a hand. No, you let him speak for 4 years. You'll give me for minutes. The tension turned visceral. Even the marble walls seemed to tighten. Jasmine opened the folder, not all the way. Just enough for the pages to breathe, enough for redacted lines to scream silently, enough for the country to know something was coming. She didn't read yet. She let it hang. Let it sting. Ask yourselves, she said, scanning the room like a soldier reading last rites. Why did the DOJ keep this sealed for 4 years? And who was protected? While America slept. The folder hadn't been opened, but its weight was already shifting the room. Jasmine's fingers lingered on its edge, cool, textured, and heavier than it should be. Because she knew exactly what lay beneath the seal. She had read it before, alone, in a locked room. 3 nights ago, she hadn't slept since. Flashback 3 days earlier. A private courier arrived at her Washington apartment at 2:17 a.m. No return address. Inside the envelope, a flash drive, a hand-signed DOJ memo, and a note that simply read, "They lied to protect him. You were never supposed to see this." A friend inside. She plugged the drive in, pulse hammering against her ribs. The screen flickered. First, a scanned page from the original Epstein log, standard names, redacted aliases, blurred timestamts. Then the cursor moved. A single entry blinked to life. Harpwell, S. With a note. A company minor, escorted by DJT Justice Samuel Hartwell, Supreme Court, revered, untouchable, or so the country thought. Jasmine clutched her chair like it might fly out from under her. Her stomach turned. This wasn't just an abuse of power. It was systemic, judicial, sacred, and rotten. And she was the one holding the match. She spent that night alone, not consulting staff, not calling Maya, just staring at the name, again and again. Samuel Hartwell, the man who'd sworn to uphold justice, and instead helped hide its courts. Then came the video. It autoplayed on the drive, tucked behind layers of encryption. A rally clip. Trump's voice arrogant, nasal, drunk on power. That Jasmine Chiclo IQ. Total clown. Texas mistake. We let those people speak, and this is what we get. It was meant to humiliate. Instead, it lit a fuse. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just sat back in the dark, whispering to no one. They think I'm scared of no's. I was born in it. And then she made her choice. She would not just open the folder. She would open every wound this country tried to bandage with denial. Because this wasn't about her. This wasn't about revenge. It was about the little girl still waiting for justice, while the men in robes shook hands with monsters. Back in the present, Jasmine's knuckles whitened as she gripped the podium. The cameras were still rolling. The red folder still sealed, but inside her, something had already broken free. "They tell you silence is safe," she murmured, gaze locking with Trump's across the room. "But maybe that's how they sell your soul without asking." She took one breath, then another. And the room leaned in, because what if truth doesn't set you free? What if it costs more than silence ever did? She didn't hesitate this time. No more warnings, no more monologues, no more glances at the camera. Jasmine Crockett unlatched the red folder with a single click. The sound was subtle paper flexing, clip releasing, but in that charged chamber, it whirred like thunder. A nation held its breath. And she began to read. "Flight log entry March 22, 2002, she said, voice clear, unwavering. Passenger, Jane Doe 2, age 14, accompanied by DJ Trump. Time fractured. Trump's face drained of color so fast it looked as if someone had pulled the blood from his veins. His lawyer leaned in to whisper too late. The chamber exploded in noise, gasps, aides shouting. One senator stood so fast his chair fell backward with a crash. Reporters reached for their phones in unison, their fingers trembling. Outside, protesters pressed harder against the barricades, and in a news studio 3,000 miles away, Rachel Maddow dropped her pen. Trump stood, fist clenched, voice louder than the mic. "This is fake. This is a fabrication. I wasn't even there. This is slander." But Jasmine didn't blink. She flipped to the next page, ignoring his eruption like she'd swat a fly. She spoke calmly, without raising her tone, because the truth was louder than rage. "So was your oath to the Constitution," she replied. "But you broke that, too. And we have the audio." He froze. The room didn't move. The click of her turning another page felt like the loading of a weapon. On the screen behind her, an aide queued up an image, a scanned signature page. DJ Trump, flight to 79, accompanied minors. Jane Doe 2, Jane Doe 5, 2 names. To silences, shattered. Trump grabbed the table to steady himself. The angle of the camera caught at the white knuckles, the twitching eye. The internet caught it too. Trump collapse trended within 90 seconds. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't point a finger. She simply read, like a surgeon reading an autopsy. Unemotional, precise, irreversible. "The Department of Justice sat on this for 1,476 days, she said. "They told us redaction was for protection. Now you see who they were really protecting," a reporter shouted from the back. "Congresswoman, how many more names are in that folder?" Jasmine paused. For the first time, she looked tired, not weak, but human, heavy with the burden she carried. Her eyes dropped briefly to the bottom of the page, then rose again, enough to make this building crack. She closed the folder slowly. No applause, no reaction, just the creaking sound of a foundation shifting under centuries of denial. And as the camera zoomed in on Jasmine's face, stone still, but fire behind the eyes, she said, "Only this. If this is just page 1, ask yourselves, what else was in this folder and who else is next?" The folder was closed, but Jasmine hadn't even lit the real match yet. She reached beneath the podium and produced a black flash drive. No label, no explanation, just danger, wrapped in plastic. Her fingers hovered for a beat before she slid it into the screen port, and the monitors behind her flickered to life. No visuals, just a voice, male, cold, and horrifyingly familiar. "If this comes out, I'll bury you all. Don't forget who stacked this court." A sound escaped the room, not words, not screams, just the collective gasp of people realizing they'd been standing on a landmine for years. Trump's posture snapped like a bad actor caught out of character, rigid, too alert, too practiced. Aides began texting in panic, and two reporters sprinted from the room. Senator Pike stood and threw his folder down, face flushed. "This is out of order," he shouted. "So was your silence," Jasmine shot back. She turned back to the screen. The transcript appeared line by line, like confessions typed by a ghost. March 3, 2023. Mar-a-Lago. Private call. One man, one judge, one cover-up. Delay. The ruling. Stall it. I've got a campaign to win. And this SHT will kill us both. Asterisk. The weight of those words crushed the oxygen in the chamber. A glass shattered at the back. A staffer wept silently into her hands. A second senator left no words, just chain dragging behind him like a broken briefcase. But Jasmine stood still. And for the first time, She let herself feel the fire rise. "The Supreme Court didn't fail us by accident," she said, each word deliberate. "They were given orders, and some of them followed them. Like foot soldiers dressed in robes." Trump's lawyer leaned over, whispering frantically. Trump whispered back but louder. His mic was off, but Jasmine's wasn't. "This voice, this is the real legacy of your presidency. Not walls, not slogans, not hats, just fear. And men who traded justice for proximity to your power." Someone tried to cut her mic. She tapped it once, still on. The chamber leaned in. "You want to know the real conspiracy?" she whispered, voice razor sharp. It wasn't what he said. It was who listened and obeyed. Then she looked into the camera, not for drama, but for clarity. For every mother who trusted the courts, for every girl who waited too long for justice, for every American who believed the highest bench wasn't for sale. "Ask yourself," she said, "when a president threatens to bury the truth, who brings the shovel?" The voice on the flash drive had faded, but the echo was still in the room. Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't need to. The weight had shifted, no longer on her shoulders alone, but spreading, infecting every man in that chamber who had ever signed a sealed order and pretended it was justice. Then came the whisper. "She's here." From the side entrance, flanked by security and shadow, a woman stepped forward. Early 40s, simple black blouse, no makeup, no fear. Just truth carved into her skin like history that refused to be forgotten. Mariah. No last name, no details, just the voice of a past the country had tried to forget. She sat before the microphone and exhaled slowly, as if giving oxygen to the dead. "My name is Mariah," she said, voice calm but raw. "And I was trafficked through Abstan's network for over 6 years. I was 12 when it started." Jasmine never looked away. "Trump did. I was flown to private islands, to hotels under fake names. I met senators, bankers, royals. Some of them were kind. Most of them weren't. But one of them told me he'd be president someday." The room froze. "He said if I ever spoke, no one would believe me, because he'd be too powerful, too famous, too untouchable." She paused, looked directly at the man across from her, the man now visibly sweating beneath his orange makeup and false composure. His name was Donald J. Trump. The silence was no longer dead. It was violent. One lawmaker stormed out. Another whispered "Jesus Christ" under his breath. On Twitter, "Mariah speaks" shot to #1. But inside the chamber, only one person moved. Trump. He stood. Jasmine stood too. "Sit down." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He hesitated, then obeyed. Mariah's voice cracked, but she kept going. "I saw his face in the flight logs last night. That's how I knew I wasn't crazy, that my nightmares had names. That's when I called her." She nodded toward Jasmine, and I asked, "If I finally told the truth, would anyone listen?" Jasmine's reply came like thunder wrapped in velvet. "I'm listening. And the world is, too." A tear slid down Mariah's cheek. "One, then, none." She didn't crumble. She didn't beg. She sat still, like a monument to everything America. The reaction wasn't loud. It was cellular, a shift in posture, breath, morality. Every man in that room felt the edge of her words like a blade brushing skin. Even Pike didn't interrupt. Even Trump didn't smirk. "I was flown on his planes. I was sold to his friends, and one of them told me, to my face, that he'd be president one day." The entire room turned toward Trump, as if gravity itself had shifted. He didn't move. He couldn't. The weight of what he feared was no longer inside a file. It was seated 20 feet away, breathing. "His name was Donald J. Trump," Mariah said, eyes locked on him. "He told me I was lucky to be in his orbit, that if I ever spoke out, I'd disappear." Jasmine clenched her fist. Trump's attorney tried to object, but his voice cracked, and the judge ignored him. The moment had a will of its own now. Mariah reached into her pocket and unfolded a photograph, grainy, faded, terrifying in its normalcy. This was him. This was me. I was 14. No one looked away. I saw his name in the flight logs last week. It was the first time in 20 years I didn't feel crazy. Jasmine stepped forward, just a little, just enough for Mariah to see she wasn't alone. Her voice was steady, low, unmistakably firm. "You're not crazy. You're not alone, and he's not untouchable." Trump jolted to his feet. Jasmine didn't blink. "Sit Down. He obeyed. Mariah's jaw trembled, but her words didn't. They told me he was too rich, too powerful, that the rules didn't apply to people like him. She looked down at her hands, then raised her eyes to the nation watching. But I'm still here, and so is my truth. Jasmine leaned into the mic, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. They buried your story, in sealed files and broken courts. But you survived the dirt. Mariah nodded once, and as the chamber sank into an unbearable stillness, Jasmine turned to the camera. What happens when the untouchable is finally cornered? The last word from Mariah hadn't faded before the backlash began. A chair screeched, papers rustled. Then the unmistakable boom of Senator Pike rising with theatrical rage, veins flaring against the collar of his starched white shirt. He jabbed a finger across the chamber like he was swatting at ghosts. This is enough. This woman, this circus has turned a congressional hearing into a damn courtroom drama. I move to strike the testimony. None of it's verified. Gasps. Half the room froze, the other half recoiled. You want to humiliate a former president, live on TV based on an emotional witness and political theater. He barked, his voice trembling with something uglier than fury-fear. Jasmine didn't move, but her fingers tensed on the edge of the desk. Then, from the opposite bench, another voice shattered the rhythm, sharp, defiant, unshakable. She's not humiliating him. He did that himself. Representative Maya Rodriguez stood tall, eyes locked on Pike like a blade drawn with precision. She wasn't yelling, she was carving. And if your only defense is volume, then maybe your side doesn't have much truth to stand on. Pike turned red. His rebuttal died in his throat. Rodriguez stepped forward, ignoring protocol, ignoring the gavel, ignoring history. You sat in the oversight committee when the Epstein files first crossed our desk. You knew, you helped redact, so spare us the sanctimony. Silence sliced through the room sharper than any gavel ever could. Jasmine exhaled, quiet, almost imperceptible. Under her breath, she whispered the words that had been circling her chest. Since the moment the folder was placed in her hand, they want me afraid. She stared at Pike, then at Trump, who sat tight-lipped, his jaw visibly clenching with every camera flash. The whole room watched her rise, not dramatically, not with vengeance, but like someone finally tired of permission. But I'm not scared, she said, into the mic, voice low but unshakable. I'm awake. A beat of silence followed, then a murmur, then a shifting of bodies, as if her words had altered the gravitational pull of the chamber. Trump leaned toward his lawyer, whispered frantically. Rodriguez placed a hand on Jasmine's shoulder, quiet solidarity. No words, just wait. What do you call it? Jasmine continued. When a girl speaks truth and men rush to silence her. When the evidence is in your hands, and your first instinct is to scream, shut her up. Senator Pike stood again. But he didn't speak, because something had changed. Not the law, not the vote, but the room. The illusion of order had cracked, and what leaked out wasn't chaos, it was clarity. Jasmine leaned slightly closer to the mic, voice edged with steel. If this isn't fear, what is it? And this time, no one dared answer. Jasmine hadn't sat back down. Her body was still upright, but it wasn't defiance anymore, it was momentum. Like once she stood, she couldn't afford to unstand again. The cameras were still rolling, the room still pulsed from the last blow. The what came next wasn't history. It was strategy. You want to talk about silence? She said, lifting a small remote from the podium. Let's talk about erasure. The screen behind her blinked. One map, then another. Her district sliced apart like old wallpaper torn by wind. But Jasmine didn't point at borders. She whispered a line she remembered her father saying when they lost power one winter night. You don't need a lamp to know who your people are. You just need darkness. They didn't just erase voters, Jasmine continued, her voice cracking just once. They erased me. The chamber flinched. In the latest map, she said, zooming in, I no longer live inside the borders of my own seat. I legally cannot run here again. A ripple of disbelief moved through the room. Even Pike looked stunned. That's illegal, someone shouted. From the gallery. Jasmine turned. No, that's gerrymandering, and in Texas. It's tradition. Trump leaned back in his chair, arms folded, expression unreadable. But his allies, those who'd worked the maps, looked suddenly exposed, as if the walls had become mirrors. They called it restructuring, Jasmine said. They told the press it was population balancing. She pulled up another screen, an internal GOP strategy memo from 2024, leaked and timestamped. Quote, neutralize Crockett's grip on Dallas base, cut voter continuity, split minority precincts under legal thresholds, replace with manageable zones, a single word at the bottom of the slide, typed in all caps, contain. She let the room sit in that word. Let it boil. They didn't just redraw my borders. They tried to erase my voice, but here's the part they don't understand. She looked into the lens, not the room this time, but the country. You can carve me out of a district, but you can't carve me out of history, or out of the hearts of the people who sent me here in the first place. Applause tried to erupt, but was quickly silenced by the gavel. Jasmine smiled, not because she needed it but because the truth had landed. You erased my zip code, she said quietly. But you didn't erase my fire. She stepped back from the podium as the screen went dark. And somewhere in America, a mother watching asked aloud the question Jasmine had just planted in millions of minds: what happens when erasure becomes strategy? The screen behind her faded to black, but the wound stayed open. Jasmine stood silently for a moment, her hands still on the podium. The data, the maps, the red lines, they had all landed. But the next blow wasn't about borders, it was about what those borders tried to erase. She reached into her blazer and pulled out a folded piece of lined paper creased at the corners, written in pencil, decorated with small purple stars. This came to my office 2 days ago, she said, her voice softer now, from a 12-year-old girl in Fort Worth. Her name is Iona. She told me I could read it. She unfolded the letter, cleared her throat, and began. Dear Ms. Jasmine, I saw the news about them changing where you work. My teacher said we might not get to vote for you anymore when I grow up. My mom says that's not fair. I asked my uncle and he said, well baby, your votes don't count in this state anyway. The chamber didn't move. Not one breath, not one page turn, but I think that's wrong. I think our voices do count, because I still hear yours. So please don't stop talking, even if they try to move you, because I'm still here. Jasmine stopped reading. Her throat tightened. Her hand trembled for half a second. Then, she looked up and spoke, not to the lawmakers but to the little girl who might be watching. They told her she doesn't count. They told her she's invisible. And they didn't say it with words, they said it with maps. A long pause. A deep breath. But let me tell you something. AYANNA. She turned back to the room, her voice sharpening again. No map decides our worth. No district line can box in our future. You can redraw the state, but you won't redraw who we are. Flashback. She's 9 years old again, sitting in the front seat of her father's truck, watching him squint at a voter registration form. He couldn't read without glasses. His hands were stained from the mechanic shop, and his words were clear as engine oil. They ain't ever gonna make this easy, Jazz. That's why you fight like your future depends on it. Because it does. The scene burned in her memory like it just happened. And now, in the echo of his voice, Jasmine looked up and realized something. This hearing, this fight, it wasn't about her seat. It was about Iona's right to one day take it. She folded the letter slowly and placed it back in her blazer. Iona's watching. Millions of Ionas are watching. She looked straight into the lens, past the walls, through the nose, into every home that ever felt like their zip code was a sentence. If they erased me this easily, whose voice was next? The chamber hadn't settled since the letter. Jasmine's voice still lingered like static in the air, alive, electric. But outside, something louder was building. Something no gavel could silence. A technician at the back of the room scrambled as her headset crackled with urgency. Then the flat screens flickered, and for the first time in congressional history, a national anchor broke into the hearing. We interrupt this broadcast with a breaking update. Rachel Maddow's voice rang out, calm but breathless. Jasmine versus Trump is now the #1 trending topic worldwide, surpassing every major news event of the year. Polls show 76% of viewers believe this hearing has already changed their trust in federal institutions. A wave rippled through the chamber, power no longer just in politics, but perception. Cameras zoomed in closer, phones vibrated under desks. Some staffers wept quietly, but Jasmine didn't blink. Let them trend me, she said, stepping back to the mic. But make no mistake, this isn't about trend. This is about truth. Outside, the roar began. 20,000 strong had gathered beyond the Capitol barricades, holding up signs that said redraw truth. she speaks for. U.S., we believe Mariah. Helicopters circled above, reporters were climbing railings. And in one moment of stillness, the crowd began to chant not rage, not slogans, but a single unified word. Iona, inside. Jasmine heard it, and for the first time all day, her composure cracked. She looked up, not at Trump, not at Pike, but at the window where sound met glass and truth met gravity. That's a 12-year-old, she whispered. And she's already louder than every man who tried to erase her. The Capitol Police tried to manage the crowd, but no one moved. They didn't riot, they stood, hands over hearts, eyes locked, on the screens broadcasting the hearing. Back inside, Representative Rodriguez leaned closer to Jasmine. This is bigger than you now. Jasmine nodded, slowly, but her voice never softened. Then we give them something to carry with them. She turned to face the full chamber again, and this time, she didn't just speak, she declared, what you see trending is not a politician. It's a reckoning. It's your daughter, your sister, your district, your vote. It's every person you told to wait, to settle, to disappear, and now they're standing outside your gates. Trump whispered something to his attorney, but no one was listening. The noise had moved outside the room to the streets, the screens, the people who refused to forget. Jasmine raised her hand to quiet the room, not to command, but to let the silence say it all. 20,000 voices outside, millions more behind them, and you still think this is just about one woman and one file. Her eyes narrowed, her voice lowered. Would 20,000 be enough to shake the ground beneath your feet? The chants outside hadn't faded. They seeped through the stone walls of the Capitol like a pressure wave, a nation pushing in. But Jasmine stood still, as if the chaos outside had become her shield. Her voice didn't shake, her hands didn't tremble, because now she was coming for the highest bench in the land. The Supreme Court of the United States has no mandatory ethics code, she began. Let me repeat that for the viewers just tuning in. No code, no shame, no checks. Some senators shifted, others scoffed, but none of them spoke. Jasmine turned toward the screens behind her and held up a flash drive. This footage was submitted anonymously, verify, time-stamped, audio enhanced, and, yes, legal. She clicked once. A grainy video filled the monitors. A private dining room in Manhattan. Low light, expensive laughter. Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, and a Supreme Court justice face partially obscure, but the voice unmistakable. So what exactly is the favor you're asking? The justice says with a grin. Trump raises his glass. Keep the files sealed until after the midterms. After that, they'll just call it old news. The room cracked open like glass under heat. Audible gasps, a paper cup dropped. One senator stood and quickly sat back down, as if afraid the floor might react. Rodriguez leaned over, her voice barely audible. You're going to make history. Or enemies? Jasmine didn't look at her. Maybe both. She turned back to the mic. Let me be clear. That justice, who I won't name here until official charges are filed, sat on Epstein-related appeals. And not once did he recuse himself. Another click. Documents now, signed rulings, email chains. The justice's initials over rulings that kept victims in limbo for years. Each frame like a match dragged across a dry field. You want to know why survivors never got justice? Jasmine asked. Because their cases were judged by men who were at the table with their predators. Trump's face twisted, half fury, half calculation. His lawyer whispered furiously, but the room no longer listened. Jasmine stepped back from the mic. If a defendant is caught bribing a juror, it's obstruction. But if a president is seen toasting with the judge, what do we call that? She scanned the faces in front of her. Not outrage, fear, not of the accusation but of the mirror she was holding up. This country trusts 9 people to define what is right and wrong. But what happens when those 9 believe they're above it? Rodriguez clenched her jaw. The crowd outside surged louder, and Jasmine, now standing squarely at the edge of her own safety, spoke the line that tore the illusion apart. What if the court is the crime? The chamber hadn't recovered. From the video, still frames of clinking wine glasses and sealed fates remain etched into the screens behind Jasmine. But she wasn't finished. Not while they still hid behind titles and robes. Not while the real paperwork stay in the shadows. She stepped forward and placed a single printed email on the desk in front of her. This is dated August 9th, 2023. From a private Gmail account traced to the personal assistant of Justice Samuel Hartwell. She paused, letting the name hang like a loaded weapon, and it was sent to the legal team of Jeffrey Epstein 9 days before the Supreme Court denied a motion to unseal the Epstein flight logs. Gasps erupted again, but this time, they weren't theatrical, they were instinctive, the sound of belief shattering. She clicked to the next line. Just a single line appeared. The chief won't object. As long as it stays quiet. Jasmine paused. Her eyes didn't move, but her mind drifted back to her father, hunched over the kitchen table, whispering through cracked lips, "Truth don't whisper. Jazz, it waits. And when it speaks, Lord help the ones who tried to cage it." The room erupted into chaos. Papers flew. One senator knocked over a water pitcher. The audience behind the chamber barrier began murmuring so loudly the sergeant at arms moved to intervene. Jasmine didn't flinch. She looked down the table at the committee chair, an aging man who had mastered decades of silence, with a polished smile. But now, his voice cracked under the weight of what he could no longer pretend not to know. "Congresswoman Crockett, I believe we may need to adjourn to review the source of—" "No," she cut in, voice sharp as broken glass. "You don't get to hide behind recess." She slammed the email to the desk. That bench was compromised. That ruling was poisoned. And every survivor still waiting for justice is owed more than polite stalling and procedural cowardice. The chairman blinked. "Lost, STAMMERING." Jasmine pointed to the screen behind her. This wasn't just an email. It was a signal from the highest court to the dirtiest pockets in America. And we're supposed to pretend the robes still mean something. Her voice cracked, but not with weakness, with fire. "Your Honor," she said directly to the chair, "the people are done honoring injustice." One aide tried to unplug the projector. Another fumbled with a folder marked confidential. But the truth had already spilled across the floor. And it didn't need wires anymore. If a single email can delay justice for thousands, you have to ask yourself. She stepped back, letting the last slide linger behind her, an image of the court seal, now overlaid with redacted lies. What did that email delay, and why? For a full minute, the chamber was held hostage by silence. Not by order, not by law, but by the collective realization that everything had cracked at once. The email, the voice, the video, the facts. They were no longer deniable. They were suffocating. And then the door opened. An aide rushed in, pale, breathless, clutching a single cream-colored envelope. She didn't speak. She handed it to the committee chair with trembling hands, then backed away like she'd just delivered a live grenade. The chair unfolded it slowly. Stopped, read again. His jaw tensed. Then he turned the microphone on and said something no one in the room expected. "We've just received an official resignation letter from Justice Samuel Hartwell, effective immediately." The room didn't gasp this time. It exhaled. "He states he bent the law to protect a man who should never have been protected. And for that, I remove myself from the bench before the bench removes itself from morality." A sound escaped Jasmine's lips, barely audible. Not surprise, recognition. She whispered it more than said it. "I knew it." On the other side of the chamber, Trump stood up, face contorted with something between fury and disbelief. "He was a good man," Trump shouted. "You ruined him. You this witch hunt. You destroyed his name." Jasmine looked at him with eyes like still water hiding deep current. "No," she said. "He did that himself. I just stopped the rest of you from pretending he didn't." The chamber froze. Again. Not in fear but in reckoning. Rodriguez leaned over, stunned, a Supreme Court justice. On camera, mid-hearing. Jasmine nodded, eyes fixed on the seal above the chamber door. They built this place to outlive the people inside it. Maybe now it finally will, but the moment wasn't over. Reporters outside the room were already broadcasting the letter. Word for word, the news rippled across every screen. In America, Hartwell resigns. Admits cover-up, Supreme Court in crisis. Inside, the committee chair tapped his gavel once, out of instinct. It echoed like a desperate heartbeat in a room no longer listening to protocol. "We will recess to process." "No," Jasmine cut in. "You don't get to hide in process, not now." She turned to the gallery. To the press, to the camera, one broke. And it was enough to shake a chamber built on denial. She held up the envelope, not as evidence but as a warning. One justice fell, and he fell on his own sword. Then she looked back at the panel of silent lawmakers, at Trump, at the millions still watching outside, and her voice softened, not weaker, but sharper. How many more are ready to break? The chamber still rang with the echo of Hartwell's confession. Jasmine hadn't moved. Her body stood rooted in the same spot, as if the room had been peeled back to reveal something more ancient than politics conviction. Outside the glass, chants rose like thunder under pressure. "We believe survivors," over and over again. Louder with each breath, Capitol security was on high alert. Uniformed officers lined the walls, exchanging glances. Jasmine's chief of staff entered quietly, his face pale, his phone still vibrating in his hand. He leaned close enough for her to hear only one word: bomb. The silence that followed wasn't fear, it was calculation. The committee chair looked down at a yellow card just handed to him by a trembling aide. He reached for the mic with shaking fingers. "Due to a credible threat." "No," Jasmine said. Before he could finish, her voice was calm, but final. The room froze. She turned, slow and deliberate, facing the officers who had already begun clearing a path toward the exit. "You want to evacuate? Go ahead. But I'm not leaving. If they want silence, they'll have to kill the mic too." Rodriguez rose halfway from her chair. "James, this is serious," she whispered. Jasmine nodded once, never looking away from the center of the room. "So is what's in this folder. So is what Mariah lived through. So is what they buried in courtrooms and locked behind privilege." Security didn't move, neither did she. Because in that moment, Jasmine Crockett was no longer just a congresswoman. She was a symbol standing between a frightened institution and an unrelenting truth. And the world was still watching. Outside, the crowd surged louder. A chant began again, this time not from bullhorns but from throats raw with belief. "She stays, we stay." The marble trembled with the rhythm of it. A young officer approached her carefully. "Ma'am, Homeland is advising we remove all principals from the building." She looked at him not with anger, but clarity. "Then tell Homeland I didn't come here to be protected. I came here to protect the truth." The officer hesitated, then stepped back. Jasmine walked slowly to the microphone. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. This chamber has seen threats before, but never like this, because this time, the threat isn't coming from outside. It's coming from what happens if we walk away. She took one long breath. The cameras zoomed in, focusing not on fear, but resolve. Let them lock it down. Let them clear the halls. But understand this: truth isn't evacuating. Her eyes never left the lens. And her final words landed like steel through smoke. "What do you do when truth makes you a target?" The building was under lockdown, but the internet was wide open. No live feed from cable, no official stream. But from the gallery row, one independent journalist didn't blink. Aaron James, armed with a cracked phone, live streamed every second. Jasmine refused to leave. No commercial breaks, no scripted panels, just raw footage unfiltered, unflinching. And the world watched. 12 minutes into the broadcast, her viewer count passed 1 million. Then 10. By the next sunrise, it crossed 121 million views across platforms. The caption was simple: "She stayed." But it wasn't just what Jasmine said that detonated the moment. It was what Trump whispered, thinking no one could hear him. In a secured hallway behind the hearing chamber, his lapel mic stayed live. He leaned into his attorney, red-faced and pacing. "Get that bitch off air before she buries us all." The clip hit Twitter within minutes. It was clipped, meant, captioned, translated into 8 languages. Comment sections erupted into digital wildfire. Buried Usul. She stayed 6 feet deep inside the chamber. Jasmine was handed a tablet. Her aide whispered, "He's trending," but not how he hoped. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She tapped play, watched his voice crack under pressure, then looked back at the room as if seeing it from a new altitude. She raised the tablet to the mic. "Get that BTCH off air." The words filled the chamber like poisonous smoke. But Jasmine exhaled slowly and cleared the air with steel. "You're afraid of being buried. You should be. But not by me." She set the tablet down and stood tall. "I don't bury people, I uncover them." Gasps followed, but no one moved. Even the guards by the door stayed frozen, suddenly aware they were witnessing not testimony but turning point. "That wasn't strategy. That was panic," she said. "That was the sound of someone choking on the truth they thought they silenced." Rodriguez glanced over, whispering without words. Finish it. Jasmine nodded. I don't need to bury him. He's already 6 feet deep in sealed files, backroom deals, and every woman he thought would never speak. She let the silence stretch not for drama, but for clarity. Then she leaned into the mic one last time, her voice low and clean. This isn't the collapse of power, it's the reveal, and it sounds a lot like fear. Behind her, the chamber didn't erupt, it imploded. To facade, the pretense, the marble polish all peeled back by 7 unscripted words and one woman who refused to flinch. She turned the tablet off, set it gently on the podium, and walked away from the mic like it had already done its job. And as the world kept watching, replaying, sharing, the only question left was, when power panics, what's left? Backstage smelled of stale coffee, anxiety, and printer ink. Jasmine had barely made it to the folding chair before her legs gave way beneath her. Her hand trembled not from fear but from everything else. The weight of 121 million hearts, the voice in her own head asking if it was enough, and the unopened envelope in her palm with no return address. The envelope was creased, smudged, at the corners. Someone had clutched it hard. Inside was a single sheet. No greeting, no sign-off, just the words, scrawled in blue ink, when you said his name on that mic, I finally slept. Jasmine stared at the page like it had a pulse. She read it again, and again. Then she folded forward, shoulders heaving, soundless at first like a dam cracking without warning. No staffer moved, no aide stepped in. The room knew better. Tears rolled silently, not of regret but of release. I wasn't supposed to cry, she whispered, fingers tightening around the letter. I was supposed to finish this standing. She looked up at the clock on the wall. 3:17 p.m. She had cracked $1 billion empire with a folder and a microphone. But this line from a woman who had lived unseen for decades, this was the part no one had prepared her for. Her voice cracked. But I will, for all of us. Across the country, in a shelter just outside Philadelphia, a woman named Mariah watched the stream on a borrowed phone. The corners of her lips trembled as she whispered Jasmine's name like a prayer she didn't know she still believed in. She'd seen the red folder. She'd heard the name spoken, his name loud, public, undeniable, and for the first time in 20 years, she believed the silence wasn't winning. Back in the chamber's green room, Jasmine placed the letter gently on the table. They called it a shadow hearing. No chamber, no gavel. Just folding chairs, a vacant gym, dusty banners from forgotten PTA nights, and a livestream camera rigged with duct tape and hope. But as thousands tuned in, first dozens, then tens of thousands, then CNN and MSNBC, what unfolded was more than protest. It was resurrection. A janitor stepped up first, still in uniform. She didn't just speak for people like me, he said, into the mic, his voice quivering. She was the only one who ever did. A nurse followed, eyes hollowed by 14-hour shifts. You erased her district on paper, but not in our bones. The testimonies kept coming. Teachers, bus drivers, veterans. Some read from scribbled notes, others just spoke from the wounds. All with one message: she speaks for us. Inside the Capitol's closed chamber, Jasmine sat watching the livestream alone in the side hallway, one AirPod in her ear, tears threatening but not falling. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in Congress, not in history, not after they gutted her district and stripped her name from the voter map like it was a stain they could bleach out. But here they were, her people shouting louder than any gavel could silence. Her voice broke, even without a seat. I have a voice, she covered her mouth, just for a moment, not to hide, to steady. Representative Maya Rodriguez rushed in quietly, tablet in hand. Eyes wide. You need to see this, Rodriguez said, tablet in hand. The world's watching. Jasmine didn't ask how many. She didn't need a number. The only statistic that mattered was the trembling voice of the little girl who had drawn her with a cape. Jasmine didn't speak. She turned her eyes back to the screen, where a fifth grader in pigtails now stood at the mic, holding a drawing of Jasmine with a cape and microphone. They tried to delete her, the girl said. But you can't delete someone who taught you to speak. Outside the gym, crowds had gathered under makeshift tents. Rain poured sideways, soaking signs and socks, but no one moved. They had been invisible long enough. Jasmine wiped her face, stood, and pressed her palm against the marble wall beside her like she was grounding electricity or history. This wasn't nose. This wasn't nostalgia. This was resistance disguised as remembrance. And in that moment, the redistricting map wasn't a death certificate. It was kindling. They erased the borders, Jasmine whispered, but not the people. Back inside the gym, the crowd began to chant not her name, but a question that thundered like thunder beneath old bleachers and cracked linoleum. If they silence one, who speaks next? And somewhere deep in the concrete veins of Washington, something shifted. Because silence was no longer absence. It had become proof that the unheard were gathering. The chamber was still damp from the echoes of voices outside. Jasmine's shoes clicked steadily against marble as she stepped back into the Capitol, this time, not to reveal a secret, but to write a new law. In her hands, a slim blue folder. No more red, no more silence, just truth, typed in 12-point font, under a bill titled, The Judicial Integrity and Public Trust Act, a proposal to establish the nation's first independent ethics commission for the Supreme Court, reporters whispered. Senators stared. Cameras turned with a hunger they hadn't shown since Watergate. Jasmine placed the folder on the podium. Her hands didn't shake. This, she said, is not vengeance. It's insurance. A ripple moved through the chamber. Committee Chair Fulton leaned forward, jaw clenched. You want an outside body to police the court? He hissed. Jasmine didn't blink. No, I want the people to know that robes are not shields. That's when the screen behind her lit up and planned. Unauthorized broadcasting trumps latest Truth Social rant in real time. Crockett's bill is the dumbest liberal stunt ever pulled. She wants to babysit the Supreme Court like a playground mom. Laughter erupted from the right wing of the chamber, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned into the mic, calm as stone. If truth is dumb, she said, then I'll stay stupid forever. A beat, then thunder, not from clouds but from clapping hands, stomping feet, and standing ovations. Even a few from across the aisle. Representative Rodriguez covered her mouth, fighting back tears. A young aide behind her whispered, "This feels historic." Jasmine turned away from the podium, slowly, her spine a line of steel beneath the storm. Her voice had been erased. Her district gutted, her life threatened, but now her words were being entered into the official record not as outrage, but as law. Sen Pike stood abruptly. I move to table this circus. It's grandstanding, not governance. But this time, the motion didn't land, because before anyone could second it, a Republican senator from Ohio silenced until now rose quietly and said, "Let the vote proceed." Gasps, eyes, whispers like lightning across the room. Jasmine didn't smile. She just folded her hands, lifted her chin, and whispered to herself, "They wanted me gone. Instead, they gave me a pen." Outside, the protest crowd swelled to 30,000. Inside, the clock ticked toward decision. And beneath all of it, one question pulsed louder than any gavel. Will the motion pass or be buried like truth before it? The gavel had gone cold. The cameras dimmed, but the nation hadn't blinked once. Jasmine sat alone in her office, lit only by the glow of Capitol dome lights. On the table beside her a stack of unopened letters, scribbled by hands too small for ballots but too brave to stay quiet. She opened one. The paper shook slightly in her fingers, not from fear but reverence. A girl's handwriting, careful and uneven, filled the lines. My name is Aliyah. I'm 11. They told me girls like us don't get to talk back, but I saw you. I won't be afraid to stand up either. Jasmine stared at the letter for a long time. She remembered being that girl in East Dallas, told her voice was too much, that her father's accent meant she'd always be less than, that dignity had a skin tone and hers wasn't it. Her father's voice came back like a phantom in the room. Fight like your future depends on it. Because it does. She looked into the camera across from her desk. It had gone live by accident, streaming to 9 million viewers still watching. Unwilling to turn the page just yet, she didn't rehearse, didn't smile, didn't blink. She just spoke to the next girl holding an envelope. I see you. They tried to redraw borders, but we read her meaning. They buried our names under numbers, districts, zip codes, but we were never numbers. We were never ink on a map. We were the hands holding the pen. A pause. The chamber behind her was silent, but outside, 30,000 people chanted her name. Like punctuation in a sentence the country had long forgotten how to finish. Jasmine looked back at the camera. Her voice cracked, but she let it. If your name has been erased. If your school erased your mother's accent. If your boss erased your dignity. If your government erased your vote. She held up Alia's letter. You are not erased. You're the next line. A knock came at the door and Nade, breathless. Madam Representative, MSNBC just called. You're polling at 71% approval. Nationwide. She didn't even look out. Good. Jasmine whispered. But I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to unlearn silence. She placed the letter gently back in its envelope, then into her coat pocket like armor. And as the camera continued rolling, millions watching, from kitchens and break rooms and buses and hospital lobbies across America found themselves leaning closer. Because in a world that kept asking women to whisper, Jasmine Crockett had chosen to hand the microphone forward. If she could speak for millions, what would you say? Hook, is history written in ink or courage? The sun never rose quietly over Washington. By dawn, the storm had already broken. For subpoenas to sealed indictments, one then missing. Donald Trump, once flanked by gold escalators and camera crews, had slipped out a side door of his Mar-a-Lago estate under heavy security. He hadn't spoken to press in 16 hours. His legal team had gone dark. His Truth Social account was locked. The king of chaos was now the ghost of it. In front of the DOJ building, a swarm of reporters battled he and rumors. The attorney general stood stiff behind a podium, flanked by federal marshals. He didn't blink, he didn't smile, he simply sighed. The Department of Justice has launched an official investigation into obstruction of justice, court interference, and witness tampering by former officials and affiliates tied to the Epstein case. Not a single name, but the air cracked with the weight of what he didn't have to say. Inside the Capitol, Jasmine Crockett stood under that same rotunda where just weeks earlier she'd been told to sit down, shut up, and color inside the lines. But the lines had moved, and the woman holding the marker hadn't flinched. Her phone buzzed. It was from the Speaker's office. Subject line: Task Force nomination confirmed, ethics reform, bipartisan. She blinked once, then nodded. Once, quietly, like a soldier who knew this wasn't the victory, it was the next battlefield. The cameras found her anyway. Of course they did. Jasmine was walking toward the press gallery when a journalist leaned forward, too stunned to hold back. Congresswoman, after all this, after the folder, the hearing, the collapse of a Supreme Court justice, the emails, the protests, the threats. You just rewrote history. What's next? Jasmine stopped walking. She turned toward the sea of microphones, breathing in the humid buzz of anticipation. We're still writing. No script. No podium. No teleprompter. Just a woman who had once been erased from a map, now redrawing the conscience of a nation. Flashbulbs exploded, but her eyes didn't blink. She walked down the Capitol steps like they were a riverbed she had memorized as a child. Outside, more than 42,000 people were gathered, not shouting anymore but holding hands in silence. Nurses, students, survivors, judges, a little girl named Alia clutching a paper envelope like it was holy. Jasmine reached the bottom step. Her voice broke through the stillness, not loud, not soft, just certain. Ink fades. Courage doesn't. And in that moment, history didn't just echo. It marched forward. The chamber was empty now, but the echo still pulsed through the wood-paneled walls. A hush had settled over the building, the kind that arrives only after storms, when no one dares speak for fear of waking the wind again. Jasmine Crockett sat alone at her desk, the overhead light casting a faint gold across the surface, like memory refusing to fade. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small leather box. The latch creaked open with a delicate resistance, as if even time itself hesitated. Inside was a wristwatch, old, scratched, but still ticking. Her father's. She placed it carefully on the desk, letting its face catch the light. It didn't shine. It glowed. For a moment, everything blurred. The marble walls, the red folder, the screaming, the silence, all melted into the voice of a man, long gone but never far. Her father. Time will test you, Jasmine. But always know when it's your time. She had been 12 when he'd said it. She remembered the smell of aftershave, the leather of his worn shoes, the way he'd said, "You're like it meant only yours." The same man who told her to read law books before cartoons, who made her memorize Thurgood Marshall before pop songs, who used to point at the Lincoln Memorial and say, "That's not stone. That's promise." And now she was here, in the middle of the promise, or what was left of it. Jasmine touched the watch gently, then looked up at the empty chamber with a steel gaze. It's time. 3 words. No applause. No microphone. but the weight of 1,000 pages of unfinished justice behind them. Outside, a storm gathered again, not in the clouds, but in the streets. Thousands more had joined the crowd, candlelight cut through the dusk like tiny rebellions. And across the country, people watched nurses on breakroom TVs, college students streaming on cracked phones, a young girl in Dallas whispering the words to her reflection, "It's time." In the heart of Washington, Jasmine Crockett stood. Once more, the watch still ticking on the desk behind her. Tick, tick, not a countdown, a beginning. The camera was rolling, but the chamber was still. Jasmine Crockett stood beneath the seal of the United States, framed by silence and light. There were no notes, no teleprompter, only a red folder, her father's watch ticking off screen, and the sound of a nation holding its breath. She faced the lens with the weight of generations on her shoulders and fire still in her eyes. This fight wasn't just mine. It was for every girl who whispered the truth and got laughed at. For every district erased with a pen, for every survivor silenced by a settlement, and for every voice drowned out by money, power, or maps. Her voice didn't shake, but something in the air did. They didn't just try to bury me, they try to bury truth. But truth doesn't rot, it roots. And the louder they pressed us into the ground, the stronger we came back. A pause, you could hear the tension on the floorboards. You could feel the country leaning in. We are not broken, we are planted. And we're done asking for sunlight. Jasmine stepped forward, her silhouette framed by the last rays of afternoon, slashing through the Capitol's marble columns. This isn't the end of a hearing. It's the beginning of one. In every school hallway where a student is told to lower her hand. In every courtroom where power protects itself. In every family who doesn't get to mourn in peace because truth was too inconvenient. Another breath. Then she pointed not at the politicians, but at us. If you're watching this right now, you are the jury. And maybe, just maybe, the next witness. She stepped back. The red folder was still sealed beside her. The watch ticked once. So ask yourself, what truth still needs to be unsealed? In your world, fade to black. The screen didn't cut to commercial. It didn't need to. It had already handed the microphone to us. This wasn't just a story about politics, it was a story about power, truth, and the cost of silence. Jasmine Crockett showed us that when the system tries to erase you, you don't disappear, you resist louder. Even in the face of threats, lies, and betrayal, she chose courage over comfort, truth over safety. And in doing so, she reminded millions that one voice can break a silence big enough to bury a nation. So now ask yourself, what truth have you been quiet about, not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered too much? And what would happen if you finally said it? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.